The moment my own mother looked a security guard in the eye and said, "She doesn't belong here. She couldn't even afford to attend this wedding." I thought humiliation was the worst thing waiting for me that afternoon. Then the venue manager walked straight past. Everyone looked at me and said, "Chelsea Nichols." He was carrying a contract folder with my name printed across the front. Why did the venue have documents connected to me? Why had my sister used my name? And why did the manager insist the ceremony couldn't begin until I saw what was inside? If you're listening from somewhere in the US or anywhere else in the world, let me know your country in the comments. I'm always curious where these stories reach. And tell me what time it is where you are right now. If you enjoy thoughtful stories about family truth and standing your ground, I'd love for you to subscribe and follow along. Trust me, this wedding was only the beginning. 6 months before that wedding, if you had asked anyone in my family who was doing the worst, financially they would have answered with my name, without hesitation. It wasn't because they had seen my bank account. It wasn't because they knew my investments, my salary, or my retirement savings. It was because I drove a 6-year-old Honda Accord, lived in a comfortable but modest townhouse outside Charlotte, and wore clothes until they actually needed replacing instead of treating shopping like a competitive sport. Appearances had become my family's favorite way to measure success. My name is Chelsea Nichols, and at 37 I worked as a senior events compliance consultant for one of the largest hospitality companies in the country. My job wasn't glamorous, and most people outside the industry had no idea what I actually did. Whenever a luxury hotel, convention center, resort, or event venue prepared for a major gathering, my team reviewed whether everything met legal, insurance, safety, and contractual requirements. Fire occupancy, vendor insurance, emergency access, alcohol licensing, accessibility regulations, liability documentation. If something went wrong at a large event, there was a good chance someone like me had either prevented it or warned people before it happened. It paid well, very well. But after my divorce 4 years earlier, my relationship with money had changed completely. My ex-husband had loved appearances almost as much as my mother did. Luxury SUVs, vacation homes we couldn't comfortably afford, designer furniture purchased on credit. Private club memberships we rarely used. From the outside, we had looked successful. Inside our marriage, we argued about bills almost every week. The divorce wasn't ugly because of infidelity or abuse. It was ugly because we finally admitted we wanted completely different lives. He wanted people to think we were wealthy. I wanted actual financial security. Starting over wasn't easy. I sold the oversized house, paid off every remaining debt, built an emergency fund, started investing consistently, bought my townhouse with a large down payment. I promised myself I would never again confuse looking wealthy with being financially stable. It turned out my family couldn't tell the difference. My younger sister, Rachel Nichols, was 3 years younger than me and naturally outgoing. She had a way of making strangers feel like lifelong friends within minutes. She also cared deeply about how people saw her. Social media wasn't just entertainment to Rachel. It was evidence that she was winning at life. When she announced her engagement to Ethan Parker during Thanksgiving dinner, everyone applauded before she'd even finished showing us the ring. Ethan seemed kind, thoughtful, grounded, a financial advisor who listened more than he talked. I genuinely liked him. "I'm so happy for both of you," I told them, pulling Rachel into a hug. "I knew you'd cry," she laughed. "I am crying. Don't get mascara on my dress." We both laughed, and for a brief moment, everything felt normal. Then my mother found a way to change the subject. "This wedding has to be elegant," Susan Nichols said, holding Rachel's left hand so everyone could admire the engagement ring again. "Nothing cheap, nothing embarrassing," Rachel smiled. "I already have ideas." "I know you do." Then my mother's eyes drifted toward me. "Chelsea's always preferred simpler things." The pause before simpler lasted just long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. "I like practical things," I answered. Susan smiled politely. "Exactly." My father, Richard Nichols, reached for his coffee. Whenever conversations became uncomfortable, he developed a remarkable interest in whatever beverage happened to be in front of him. It had been that way my entire life. He wasn't cruel. He just believed silence was the safest place to stand. Over the next several weeks, wedding planning became the center of every family conversation. Rachel created group chats, Pinterest boards, dress ideas, venue tours, cake tastings, flower consultations. Everyone seemed included. Except me. At first I assumed it was scheduling. I traveled often for work. Missing one lunch or one venue visit wasn't unusual, but then I realized something. Every family dinner ended with conversations that had clearly started somewhere else. Everyone loved the ballroom. The champagne package was worth upgrading. The photographer suggested sunset portraits. Oh, Aunt Denise already chose her dress. I smiled and listened. No one ever asked whether I wanted to come. One Sunday afternoon, I decided to stop waiting for invitations. I called Rachel. "Need help with anything?" "Actually, I think we're okay. I have some flexibility next weekend if you're touring venues." "We already finished. What about vendors?" "We've narrowed everything down." "I could review contracts if you want." She laughed lightly. "You never stop working, do you?" "I was just offering." "I know." There was nothing rude about her tone, but there wasn't any room left in the conversation either. That evening, my friend Emily Carter came over with takeout. Emily and I had worked together for almost 9 years. She knew me well enough to recognize when something was bothering me before I admitted it. "You've been unusually quiet. My sister's getting married. That's supposed to be good news." "It is." She waited. "So why do you look like someone canceled Christmas?" I shrugged. "I think they're intentionally leaving me out." Emily looked at me carefully. "Can I ask something?" "Always." "Has your family ever actually known how much money you make?" I laughed. "No." "Then what makes them think you're struggling?" "I don't spend the way they do." Emily nodded immediately. "That's it." "What?" "They've mistaken restraint for failure." I stirred my noodles without eating. "You think it's really that simple?" "I've met your mother exactly twice." "And?" "She notices labels before she notices people." I wanted to disagree. Instead, I changed the subject, because deep down, I knew Emily wasn't completely wrong. A week later, our extended family group chat exploded with excitement after Rachel announced she had reserved one of the most exclusive waterfront venues near Charleston. Everyone congratulated her. I typed, "Congratulations! It's beautiful! Let me know if I can help with anything." Rachel responded with a heart emoji. Nothing else. Later that night, my cousin Amanda accidentally sent me a private message she clearly meant for someone else. It read, "I honestly feel bad Chelsea can't afford all these wedding events." Less than 5 seconds later, another message arrived. "Oh my gosh, wrong person. Please ignore that." I stared at my phone for several minutes. Then I simply replied, "No worries." I never asked why she believed that, because I already suspected the answer. 2 days later, Aunt Denise called. "I just wanted to say I understand." "Understand what?" "That you decided not to participate in the bridal weekend." "I never said that." There was a long silence. "I thought Rachel told everyone you were trying to save money." "I've never even seen the schedule." Another silence. "Oh." That single word told me everything. Someone had been speaking for me. Someone wanted people to believe I was choosing not to be involved. I still hoped there was an innocent explanation, maybe a misunderstanding, maybe crossed messages. Then 3 weeks later, a cream-colored envelope arrived in my mailbox. The wedding invitation was beautiful, heavy paper, gold embossing, elegant calligraphy. But as I flipped through it, something immediately felt wrong. There was no itinerary, no rehearsal information, no RSVP card, no accommodation details. Several pages had obviously been removed before the envelope was sealed. I laid everything across my kitchen table and quietly counted the contents twice. The invitation wasn't incomplete by accident. Someone had decided exactly which pieces I wasn't supposed to receive. I spent almost 20 minutes staring at the invitation spread across my kitchen table. Maybe there had been a printing mistake. Maybe whoever assembled the envelopes had accidentally skipped a few inserts. That explanation lasted until I called my cousin Amanda. "Hey," I said casually, "quick question. Did your invitation include the rehearsal schedule?" "It did." "What about the RSVP card?" "Yes." "And the hotel information?" Amanda hesitated. "Why, I don't have any of those." Another pause. "Chelsea, I thought you weren't coming." "Who told you that?" I don't know." "You do." She sighed softly. "Rachel said you didn't want people worrying about your budget." I closed my eyes. I never said anything like that. "I know that now." Amanda sounded genuinely uncomfortable. "I'm sorry. It isn't your fault." After we hung, I placed my phone face down and sat in silence. The missing pages weren't an accident. Someone had deliberately controlled the information I received. Not enough to keep me from technically being invited, just enough to make it difficult for me to participate. It was subtle, calculated. Exactly the kind of thing that allowed someone to deny everything later. A few days afterward, Rachel invited the immediate family to dinner at her house. I almost declined. Instead, I reminded myself that assumptions weren't evidence. If I wanted answers, I needed to keep observing instead of reacting. Rachel and Ethan had recently bought a beautiful home outside Charlotte. It wasn't enormous, but it had the kind of polished elegance people admired immediately. Fresh landscaping, neutral colors, expensive kitchen appliances. The dining table had already been decorated with wedding magazines, color samples, and folders. Rachel greeted everyone cheerfully. "Chelsea, you made it." "I wouldn't miss family dinner." Susan hugged me. "I'm surprised you had time. Aren't you always traveling?" "Not this week." Richard carried bottles of wine inside, while Ethan grilled steaks on the patio. For the first half hour, everything felt surprisingly relaxed. Then Rachel excused herself to answer a phone call. While she stepped outside, Ethan began gathering plates from the dining table. Several folders slid toward me. One opened just enough for a stack of printed venue documents to become visible. I wasn't trying to snoop. I recognized the forms instantly. Years of reviewing event paperwork had trained my eyes to identify them in seconds. Certificate of insurance requirements, vendor compliance checklist, emergency occupancy worksheet, alcohol service documentation. Before I realized what I was doing, I had quietly skimmed the first page. Something immediately caught my attention. The occupancy calculation didn't match the ballroom capacity. Another page listed entertainment equipment without corresponding electrical approval. The catering insurance certificate referenced an expiration date that would occur before the wedding. Individually, none of those mistakes guaranteed disaster. Together, they could delay an event or expose everyone involved to unnecessary liability. Rachel walked back inside. Without thinking, I said, "Can I point out something?" She smiled politely. "Sure." I rotated one page toward her. "This occupancy number doesn't match the ballroom listed on page 4. Rachel frowned. "So, If the venue audits the final guest count, they'll probably ask for clarification. She looked unconcerned. Our planner handled all of that. I know. I pointed to another page. This insurance certificate also expires before your wedding date. Ethan leaned closer. Is that a problem? Probably an easy fix. I smiled reassuringly. They'll just need an updated certificate. Rachel folded her arms. Our planner is very experienced. I'm sure she is. I don't think we need to worry. I'm not saying you should worry. I'm only saying these are things I'd double-check. Susan suddenly laughed from across the room. Chelsea always finds problems. Everyone looked toward her. What do you mean? Ethan asked. Oh, it's just her personality. Susan smiled. She notices paperwork before she notices centerpieces. Rachel laughed. I definitely notice centerpieces. I know, sweetheart. Susan turned toward me. Maybe instead of reading contracts, you should help Rachel choose something prettier to wear to the rehearsal dinner. A few people chuckled politely. I smiled because arguing over a joke never helped anyone. Ethan glanced back down at the paperwork. I actually appreciate Chelsea mentioning it. Rachel quickly collected the folders. We've hired professionals. Chelsea, that's enough. Her voice wasn't angry. It was dismissive, like someone ending a conversation with a child. I was only trying to help. I know. She smiled again. But tonight you're just my sister. Not the consultant. The conversation moved on. No one mentioned the documents again. By dessert, everyone was discussing honeymoon destinations. I listened more than I spoke. One habit my career had strengthened over the years was patience. People often revealed more when they believed a conversation was over. As everyone gathered in the living room, Susan quietly spoke to Rachel near the kitchen. She thought no one could hear. Chelsea means well. I know. But don't let her complicate things. Rachel lowered her voice. She won't. I pretended to be interested in a family photo hanging on the wall. I never confronted them. There wasn't enough information yet. Over the following 3 weeks, life returned to normal. Work took me to Atlanta, then Nashville, then Jacksonville. Wedding planning disappeared into the background. Until one Tuesday morning, I was sitting in a hotel conference room reviewing documentation for a convention center renovation when my work email chimed. The sender surprised me. Daniel Mercer, General Manager, Harbor Point Grand Resort, Charleston, South Carolina, Rachel's wedding venue. The subject line read, "Thank you for your compliance recommendations." I frowned. There had to be some mistake. I opened the message. Dear Ms. Nichols, thank you for reviewing the compliance observations associated with the Parker-Nichols wedding. Your recommendations regarding occupancy calculations, vendor insurance renewals, and emergency access documentation were extremely helpful. Our operations team has completed the requested corrections and appreciates your professionalism. I read the paragraph twice, then a third time. Every issue mentioned in the email matched the concerns I had casually pointed out during dinner. Every single one. But I had never contacted the venue, never submitted recommendations, never introduced myself, never reviewed their files professionally. I scrolled farther down. Attached were revised compliance summaries. Someone had forwarded detailed notes under my name. I checked the sender again. It was legitimate. Official company domain. Correct digital signature. No signs of phishing. Daniel Mercer clearly believed I had participated in the wedding planning process. Emily happened to call during my lunch break. You sound distracted. I just got the strangest email. After reading it aloud, she became very quiet. That's not normal. Not even close. What are you going to do? I'll reply. And I'll explain they contacted the wrong person. Emily didn't answer immediately. Finally, she asked one question. Chelsea? Yeah. How would they even know your name? I looked back at the email. That question bothered me more than anything else. My name wasn't connected to Rachel's wedding. At least it wasn't supposed to be. Yet somehow the venue manager knew exactly who I was and seemed convinced I had already been working with his team. I answered Daniel Mercer's email before I could talk myself out of it. I kept it short, professional, clear. Mr. Mercer, I believe there has been a misunderstanding. I have never been retained to provide compliance consulting services for the Parker-Nichols wedding. I have not reviewed any official venue documentation, submitted recommendations, or authorized anyone to represent me in that capacity. Would you have time for a brief phone call this afternoon? Regards, Chelsea Nichols. He replied less than 10 minutes later. Absolutely. I think we should speak today. That sentence alone made my stomach tighten. Most venue managers didn't rearrange their schedules over a simple administrative mistake. At 3 o'clock, my phone rang. Chelsea Nichols. Speaking. This is Daniel Mercer. His voice was calm and measured. I appreciate you reaching out. I think there's been some confusion. I believed the same thing. The way he said it immediately caught my attention. Believed. Past tense. I've already opened your client file. My client file. Yes. I leaned back in my chair. I don't have a client file with your venue. There was a brief silence. I'm beginning to understand that. Daniel sounded less confused than concerned. I'd like to ask you a few questions. Of course. Did you ever review occupancy calculations for the Parker-Nichols wedding? No. Did you request updated vendor insurance certificates? No. Did you recommend changes to emergency access planning? No. Have you communicated with anyone on my staff before today? Never. Another pause. Then I heard papers turning. I have documents indicating otherwise. My pulse began to rise. What kind of documents? Authorization paperwork. I frowned. Authorization for what? For you to act as the family's professional compliance consultant. I felt the room go completely still. There must be a mistake. I hope there is. Daniel spoke carefully, choosing every word. The wedding file contains forms identifying you by full legal name, your professional title, and your company. My company? Yes. How would anyone even know that? I assumed you provided the information. I absolutely did not. I opened my laptop and pulled up my calendar, trying to remember every interaction I'd had regarding Rachel's wedding. There hadn't been any. Outside that dinner conversation, I had never discussed venue operations with anyone. Daniel continued, Our venue hosts high-profile events every weekend. I understand. When clients hire outside compliance consultants, we document that relationship. So you believed I had officially accepted responsibility? Yes. The words hit me harder than I expected. Responsibility. That wasn't just a courtesy title, it carried legal meaning. Mr. Mercer. You can call me Daniel. Daniel, what exactly does the paperwork say? I think it would be better if I showed you. I travel constantly. We can arrange a secure video meeting. I hesitated. Would you be comfortable sharing the file? I'll need to redact confidential financial information first. That's fair. I'll send you everything relevant. 2 hours later, an encrypted meeting invitation appeared in my inbox. When the video connected, Daniel sat inside a modern office overlooking the Charleston Harbor. Behind him hung framed photographs of weddings held at the resort over the years. He greeted me politely before holding up a thick contract folder. I've removed pricing information and personal payment details. I appreciate that. He opened the file. The first several pages looked ordinary. Reservation agreements, vendor schedules, insurance requirements. Then he stopped. I'd like you to look at page 14. He shared his screen. At the top of the page appeared a heading, Professional Compliance Representative. Underneath was my name, Chelsea Nichols, exactly as it appeared on my professional certifications. Below that was my job title, Senior Events Compliance Consultant. Even my office phone number was listed correctly. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. That isn't information people normally know. I assumed you submitted it. I didn't. Daniel enlarged the document. Please examine the signature. Someone had written Chelsea Nichols in flowing cursive. At first glance, it looked convincing. Until I looked closer, the capital C curved differently. The final S ended with a flourish I had never used. Whoever signed it had clearly copied my signature from somewhere else, but they hadn't copied it perfectly. That's not mine. I suspected as much. You did. I've worked with many consultants. Daniel folded his hands. Professionals tend to sign their names consistently. I do. This signature appears studied. I let out a slow breath. Someone hadn't simply typed my name. They had attempted to imitate my signature. Daniel clicked to another page. This email authorized us to communicate directly with you. The email address was mine, except one letter had been changed. Instead of Chelsea.Nichols, someone had created an almost identical address. One extra character. Easy to miss, almost impossible to notice during a busy workday. I stared at the screen. They created a fake email. It appears that way. Daniel clicked again. Another document appeared. Meeting notes. Compliance recommendations received from Ms. Nichols. Each recommendation matched concerns I had mentioned during dinner. Occupancy, insurance, emergency exits, electrical review. Someone had taken my casual observations, rewritten them professionally, and submitted them under my identity. Daniel watched my expression carefully. You recognize these. I recognize the issues, but not the document. Correct. He nodded. That answers another question. What question? We wondered why someone with your experience submitted recommendations but never requested supporting documentation. I rubbed my forehead. Because I never wrote them. Exactly. He leaned forward. Chelsea, I need to ask something difficult. Go ahead. Who within the wedding planning process would have known your credentials? I thought through every conversation, every dinner, every family gathering. Then one memory came back with startling clarity. The evening at Rachel's house, the folders on the dining table, Rachel laughing when I pointed out the paperwork mistakes. Susan saying I noticed contracts instead of decorations. Everyone had been sitting there. Everyone had heard me identify those problems in less than 2 minutes. I slowly looked back at Daniel. My sister. He remained silent. Rachel. She was present, duh. Yes. Did she know your profession? Of course. Would she have had access to your business information? I swallowed. Years earlier, Rachel had helped me organize digital files after my divorce. She had copies of my resume, professional certifications, old business cards, even scanned employment documents. At the time, I had trusted her completely. Daniel didn't accuse anyone. He simply asked another question. When the venue requested a designated compliance representative, someone already knew exactly who to name. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, Daniel opened one last document. Client contact authorization. At the bottom was Rachel's signature. Immediately above it appeared a sentence that made my blood run cold. Professional consultant authorized by bride. That wasn't all. Beneath Rachel's signature was a handwritten note. Chelsea has agreed to assist but travels frequently. Please contact me first if anything is needed. I never made that agreement. I never gave that permission. I had never even seen the document before that moment. Daniel closed the folder gently. Our venue approved several compliance exceptions because we believed a qualified professional was overseeing the remaining issues. I stared at him. You trusted my reputation. Yes. And someone used it without asking. Yes. For the first time since the call began, Daniel's expression changed from professional concern to genuine sympathy. Chelsea, if what we're looking at is accurate, someone didn't just misuse your name. They placed your professional reputation behind legally significant decisions. For several minutes after the video call ended, I couldn't bring myself to close my laptop. I just sat there staring at my own reflection in the black screen. If Rachel had simply told people I was helping with the wedding, it would have been dishonest, but manageable. What I had just seen was something entirely different. Someone had created a false email account. Someone had imitated my signature. Someone had represented me as a licensed professional responsible for compliance decisions tied to a large public event. That crossed a line far beyond family drama. I reached for my phone and called the one person I trusted to separate emotion from law, Melissa Grant. We had met almost 12 years earlier when a hotel chain hired both of us during a complicated insurance dispute. She specialized in professional liability. I specialized in compliance. Over the years, we'd become close friends. She answered on the second ring. Chelsea, I need an hour. Personal or professional? I don't think those are separate anymore. Her office was only 15 minutes from mine. By 5:30 that afternoon, I was sitting across from her conference table while she quietly read every document Daniel had shared. She didn't interrupt. She didn't speculate. She simply turned one page after another. When she finally looked up, her expression was serious. First, she folded her hands. I'm very glad you called before confronting anyone. I almost called Rachel. I'm glad you didn't. Why? Because right now you have evidence. She tapped the stack of papers. If you confront her immediately, people start rewriting history. What do you mean? They delete emails. They change stories. They claim misunderstandings. They pressure witnesses. She leaned back. Documents don't get emotional. People do. That was one of the reasons I trusted Melissa. She always brought conversations back to facts. So where do I stand? Legally, yes. She organized the documents into neat piles. Let's simplify this. I nodded. If someone signs your name without permission, that's one issue. Okay. If someone falsely presents you as acting in a professional capacity, she pointed to another page. That's another issue. And if another business relies on your professional reputation to make operational decisions, she paused, that creates potential liability. I already knew the word, but hearing it aloud made it heavier. Liability. Melissa noticed my expression. Don't panic. I'm trying not to. The important thing is timing. What do you mean? You discovered this before anything happened. If an accident had occurred during the wedding, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I understood. If an emergency happened, if someone were injured, if insurance companies investigated, my name could appear inside the documentation, even if I had done absolutely nothing. Melissa slid another page toward me. Read paragraph 11. I scanned the contract. One sentence immediately stood out. Professional consultant acknowledges responsibility for reviewing compliance documentation relating to venue operational recommendations. I looked up. I never agreed to this. I know. But that's exactly why we need to act carefully. She reached for a legal pad. We're going to protect you. How? Step 1. She wrote a number. Create a timeline. I opened my notebook. Every conversation, every email, every family dinner, every text message, every date. No opinions. No assumptions. Only facts. I spent the next hour reconstructing everything. The engagement announcement, the planning dinner, the missing invitation pages, the accidental text from Amanda, the strange email from Daniel, the video conference. Melissa occasionally asked small questions. What day was the dinner? Did Ethan hear your recommendations? Who else was in the room? Did Rachel ever directly ask permission? No. Did you ever tell anyone you accepted responsibility? Never. By the end, we had nearly 4 pages of chronological notes. Melissa nodded with satisfaction. This is good. It doesn't feel good. No. But it's organized. Organization had always been strangely comforting to me. Facts created structure. Structure reduced panic. Melissa opened her laptop. Now we prepare something else. A lawsuit. She actually smiled. No. A boundary. She drafted a formal notice addressed to Harbor Point Grand Resort. The language was calm, professional, carefully limited. It stated that I had never accepted any consulting role related to the wedding, that I had never authorized anyone to use my credentials, that I immediately rejected any representation suggesting otherwise, and that I wanted the venue to know as soon as possible so they could make informed decisions moving forward. No accusations, no emotional language, no demands, just facts. Melissa let me read it twice before asking, comfortable signing, yes. This protects you. I signed my actual signature beneath the statement. The difference between my real signature and the forged one was impossible to miss now that I had seen them side by side. Melissa scanned the letter and emailed it directly to Daniel. Within 20 minutes, he replied, Thank you, Ms. Nichols. Your prompt notification is appreciated. We are initiating an internal review immediately. Internal review. The words sounded routine, but in the hospitality industry, they carried weight. A venue didn't launch an internal review over minor misunderstandings. It meant they intended to verify every document connected to the wedding, every authorization, every communication, every approval, every digital record. As I gathered my things, Melissa asked one final question. What do you want to happen? I thought about Rachel, about Susan, about Ethan who might know nothing, about dozens of vendors simply trying to do their jobs. I don't want the wedding destroyed. Melissa nodded. I believe you. I just don't want my name attached to something I never agreed to. That's a reasonable goal. I don't want revenge. I know. I want the truth. She smiled gently. Those aren't always the same thing. Driving home, I expected to feel relieved. Instead, I felt strangely hollow. Part of me still hoped Daniel would discover an innocent explanation. Maybe a planner had misunderstood. Maybe someone had completed paperwork too casually. Maybe Rachel hadn't realized the seriousness of what she'd done. I held on to those possibilities longer than I probably should have. 3 days passed without another update. Then on Friday afternoon, Daniel called. Chelsea. Hi, Daniel. I wanted to let you know your notice has been added to the official file. Thank you. Our investigation has begun. I waited. There are additional issues. What kind of issues? I'd rather not speculate until we've completed our review. That's fair. But I can tell you this. His voice became even more careful. The documentation connected to your name isn't the only inconsistency we've identified. I felt my grip tighten around the phone. What does that mean? It means your situation may be part of something larger. Before I could ask another question, another call flashed across my screen. Mom, Susan Nichols. I ignored it. Seconds later, a text message appeared. Chelsea, stop making everything difficult. Wealthy people will be at this wedding. If you really love your sister, you'll stay home and avoid embarrassing everyone. I read the message twice. Then I quietly took a screenshot before responding with nothing at all. I looked at my mother's text message for a long time before locking my phone. A few years earlier, it would have worked. Not because I believed I embarrassed people, because I had been trained to believe that keeping peace was my responsibility. Growing up, conflict always followed the same pattern. Someone hurt me. I reacted. Then I became the problem because I reacted. It took years and one expensive divorce to understand the difference between causing conflict and refusing to absorb it. This time I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to defend myself. I wasn't even going to explain why the message was cruel. I simply archived the screenshot beside every other document I had collected. Facts, dates, evidence. Nothing more. The following Monday, Daniel called again. I wanted to give you an update. I'm listening. Our internal review is still ongoing. I expected that. But I thought you should know we've confirmed something important. I sat a little straighter. What is it? The email account communicating with our staff wasn't yours. I figured that out. We've verified it. How? Our IT department compared login records. Daniel explained everything in language that anyone could understand. Every time someone logged into the venue's client portal, the system automatically recorded basic information. Not passwords, not private files, just routine security records, the date, the approximate location, the internet connection used. It's standard security, Daniel said. It helps us investigate technical problems. So you know where the fake account was accessed. We know enough. Can you tell me? Not specifically. I understand. But I can tell you something else. I waited. The legitimate emails you sent us last week originated from your company's secure network. Right. The earlier emails came from somewhere entirely different. So they couldn't have been mine. Correct. For the first time since this nightmare had started, I felt something solid beneath my feet. Objective verification, not opinions, not assumptions, data. Daniel continued. We've also confirmed the authorization form was uploaded from the same account. I closed my eyes. So whoever created the fake email also submitted the paperwork. That's our current understanding. When will you tell Rachel? There was a brief silence. We've already requested a meeting. My heart skipped. Has she responded? Yes. And she said everything was simply a misunderstanding. That sounded exactly like Rachel. Not a denial, not an explanation. A misunderstanding. Daniel's voice remained calm. Our responsibility isn't to assign motives. It's to determine what happened. I appreciate that. We're following the documentation. Not emotions. I smiled despite myself. I work the same way. I suspected you did. Before ending the call, Daniel added one more sentence. We're preparing contingency procedures. What does that mean? If unresolved compliance questions remain on the wedding day... He paused carefully. The venue must be prepared. Prepared for what? He wouldn't elaborate. Neither of us needed to. Luxury venues protected themselves first. If documentation couldn't be trusted, operations changed. That afternoon, I buried myself in work. My company was helping a convention center prepare for an international medical conference. Thousands of attendees, hundreds of vendors, millions of dollars in equipment. There was comfort in solving problems that followed rules. Unlike family. Around 4 o'clock, Emily stopped by my office carrying 2 coffees. I figured you'd forget lunch again. I probably did. She handed me 1 cup before sitting across from my desk. So, they confirmed the fake email. Emily slowly nodded. How are you holding up? I'm disappointed. Not angry? Oh, I'm angry. I laughed quietly. I'm just trying not to make decisions while I'm angry. She looked around my office. Every document related to Rachel's wedding sat inside one neatly labeled folder. No sticky notes, no dramatic headlines, just dates, evidence, correspondence. You've organized everything. I had to. Because it helps. Because facts don't change depending on who tells the story. Emily smiled. I wish more families understood that. I did too. That evening, my phone buzzed with another family group message. Rachel had posted photographs from her final dress fitting. Everyone filled the chat with compliments. Beautiful, perfect, stunning, princess. Then Susan wrote, everything is finally coming together. A minute later, another message appeared. Chelsea, I hope you've accepted that staying home is the most graceful decision. She didn't send it privately. She sent it where the entire family could read it. The typing bubbles appeared almost immediately, then disappeared. Nobody responded. Not Amanda, not Aunt Denise, not Richard. Silence. I typed nothing. Instead, I saved another screenshot. Emily had once told me something that suddenly made perfect sense. Silence inside a family often protects the loudest person. It rarely protects the truth. 2 days later, Daniel called again. I wanted to let you know we completed interviews with everyone directly involved. Everyone, the wedding planner, the catering coordinator, our operations staff, our event administrator. What about Rachel? Yes. What did she say? I'm afraid I can't discuss private interviews. Of course. But I can share procedural information. Okay. When statements conflict with documentation, he stopped. Documentation usually resolves the question. That sentence lingered in my mind long after the conversation ended. Documentation usually resolves the question. Not personalities, not popularity, not family hierarchy, just records. Friday morning, exactly 1 week before the wedding, another text arrived from Susan. This one was much longer. Chelsea, Rachel has enough stress already. Please don't make this about yourself. The wedding guests include successful business owners, physicians, and attorneys. People like that notice everything. Showing up in your old car and bargain store clothes will only create awkward conversations. If you truly love your sister, give her one perfect day and stay home. I read it twice. Oddly enough, it didn't hurt the way she probably intended. Instead, it answered a question I hadn't fully understood before. This had never been about money. If Susan honestly believed I was poor, she would have offered help. Instead, she offered exclusion. She wasn't worried about my finances. She was worried about appearances, the image of a successful family, the version of our lives she wanted strangers to believe. For years, I had confused criticism with concern. Now I could finally see the difference. I opened my calendar. The wedding was next Saturday. I clicked on the date. Then I entered one simple appointment. Charleston, 11:30 a.m. No notes, no reminders, just the time, just the place, just a quiet decision. I wasn't going because I wanted a confrontation. I wasn't going to prove anything to my family. I was going because I had received a legitimate invitation, because I had done nothing wrong, because shrinking myself to make someone else's story easier had never actually brought peace. As I closed my laptop, my phone buzzed one more time. A message from Daniel. Ms. Nichols, thank you again for your professionalism throughout this process. Should you decide to attend next Saturday, please know that if any questions arise regarding the documentation, I would appreciate the opportunity to speak with you personally before the ceremony begins. I read the message once, then again. He wasn't asking me to create a scene. He wasn't promising a dramatic confrontation. He was simply acknowledging one fact. The truth had not finished revealing itself. By the time I crossed the Arthur Ravenel Jr. Bridge into Charleston the following Saturday morning, I had already made one promise to myself. I would not argue with anyone. I would not defend my income. I would not explain my career. And I would not let my family's opinion decide whether I belonged in a room I had been invited to enter. The waterfront resort looked exactly the way Rachel had always imagined. White columns overlooked the harbor. Fresh hydrangeas lined the entrance. A string quartet played softly on the lawn while guests drifted toward the ballroom carrying wrapped gifts. It was elegant, tasteful, beautiful. For a moment, I almost forgot why my stomach felt so tight. I parked my Honda beside a row of luxury SUVs and European sedans. As I locked the door, I caught myself smiling. 6 months earlier, I might have felt embarrassed. Now all I thought was, my car is paid for. That quiet thought gave me more confidence than any designer handbag ever could. I walked toward the entrance carrying nothing but a small wedding gift and my invitation. A young attendant smiled. "Good afternoon." "Good afternoon." He reached for the guest list. "Your name, please." "Chelsea Nichols." Before he could search the list, I heard my mother's voice. "Landon." The attendant looked up. Susan was walking quickly toward us, her heels striking the stone walkway with surprising speed. She wasn't smiling. "I'll handle this." The young attendant looked uncertain. Susan stopped directly in front of me. "What are you doing here?" "I came to Rachel's wedding." "I told you not to." "I received an invitation." "You know exactly what I meant." Several nearby guests had already turned toward us. I kept my voice calm. "I don't want a scene." "Then leave." "I'd rather attend my sister's wedding." Susan folded her arms. "You weren't supposed to come." "I was invited." "You were invited because it would have looked bad if we hadn't mailed something." The words hung in the air. Even the attendant looked uncomfortable. I slowly held up the invitation. "This invitation asked me to be here." Susan didn't even glance at it. "You know these people." She gestured toward the arriving guests. "They have expectations." I looked around. People were chatting, laughing, taking photographs. No one seemed interested in what kind of car anyone had driven. "The only people paying attention," I said quietly, "are standing right here." Her expression hardened. "You always have to make everything difficult." "No." I just accepted an invitation. Rachel finally appeared from inside the lobby. She froze when she saw us. For one brief second, I thought she might step between us. Instead, she looked at our mother. "What happened?" "Your sister insists on coming." Rachel looked at me. "Chelsea." I waited. "I thought we understood each other." "No." "I don't think we ever did." She sighed. "This isn't the day." "I agree. So please don't make it harder." "I haven't." Susan stepped closer. "Chelsea, you're embarrassing everyone." I glanced around again. A few guests had noticed. Most hadn't. "The embarrassment," I replied softly, "started when your family blocked someone at the entrance." Before Susan could answer, the young attendant cleared his throat. "Mrs. Nichols." "What?" I should probably contact management." "There's no need." "I believe there is." He picked up the phone beside the reception desk. Susan reached toward it. Don't bother them with family issues." "It's venue policy." The attendant spoke quietly into the receiver. "I have a guest requesting assistance at the main entrance." Less than a minute later, The lobby doors opened. A tall man in a navy suit walked toward us with calm, deliberate steps. Daniel Mercer. He recognized me immediately. Miss Chelsea Nichols. Not Chelsea. Not Miss Nichols. The same professional greeting he had used during every phone call. He extended his hand. I'm glad you made it. I shook it. Thank you. Susan looked completely confused. You know her, Daniel turned politely. Yes, ma'am. Professionally? Rachel's face lost its color. Daniel looked back at me. Would you come inside with me, please? Susan stepped between us. She isn't attending. Daniel remained perfectly composed. According to our records, he looked toward the reception desk. Miss Nichols is an invited guest. Susan tried again. This is a family matter. I understand. Daniel nodded respectfully. However, anything occurring on resort property is also a venue matter. His tone never changed. He wasn't arguing. He was simply stating policy. Rachel finally spoke. Daniel, he turned toward her, I believe we should proceed with the ceremony. I'm afraid we can't. A silence settled over the entrance. What do you mean? Rachel asked. Daniel answered carefully. There are unresolved contractual issues requiring immediate clarification. Susan frowned. This is absurd. I'm sorry you feel that way. Guests had begun arriving faster now. Several members of the wedding party exchanged confused looks. Ethan walked through the lobby carrying his tuxedo jacket over one shoulder. He smiled at first. Then he noticed everyone's expressions. What's going on? Rachel immediately answered. Nothing. Daniel spoke at the same moment. There are important documents we need to review before today's event proceeds. Ethan looked back and forth between them. What documents? Daniel opened the leather portfolio he had been carrying. Inside was the same contract folder I had seen from a distance in the parking area. My name appeared clearly across the tab. Chelsea Nichols. Ethan frowned. Why is Chelsea's name on our venue file? Rachel didn't answer. Neither did Susan. Daniel removed several documents. I believe, he said calmly, it's best if we discuss this privately. He looked directly at Ethan. This conversation concerns the authorization used during your wedding planning process. Ethan's expression changed immediately. Authorization. Yes. For everyone's benefit, including yours, I recommend we meet in the conference room before guests are seated. Rachel's breathing became noticeably uneven. We don't have time for this. Daniel met her eyes. Respectfully, we no longer have time to avoid it. No one spoke as Daniel led us down a quiet hallway away from the ballroom. The music faded behind us. So did the conversations and laughter. It felt strange knowing that only a few doors away, nearly 200 guests believed the biggest concern that afternoon was whether the ceremony would begin on time. Inside a private conference room, Daniel held the door open. The room was simple. A polished wooden table, a wall-mounted screen, several leather chairs, a pitcher of water. Nothing about it felt dramatic. If anything, its ordinary appearance made the situation feel even more serious. Daniel waited until everyone was seated. Rachel remained standing. We don't need to do this. I believe we do, Daniel replied. Ethan looked from Rachel to Daniel. I still don't understand what's happening. You deserve an explanation. Daniel placed a folder in front of Ethan. Everything I'm about to discuss is supported by documentation. He looked around the room. I'd appreciate it if everyone allowed each document to speak before anyone interrupted. It was the most polite request for order I had ever heard. No one objected. Daniel opened the folder. Our venue maintains complete records of every significant communication involving large events. He slid the first document across the table. This is the professional compliance representative authorization submitted approximately 5 months ago. Ethan read silently, then he frowned. Chelsea. He looked up. Why is your name here? I answered quietly. Because someone put it there. I didn't. Daniel placed another document beside the first. This authorization identified Ms. Chelsea Nichols as the professional consultant responsible for reviewing compliance-related matters associated with your event. Ethan looked confused. I never knew we had an outside consultant. Rachel finally spoke. It wasn't a big deal. Daniel remained calm. It became a significant matter because Ms. Nichols never accepted that role. Rachel crossed her arms. It was just paperwork. No, I said softly. It wasn't. Everyone looked at me. I kept my voice steady. In my profession, authorization tells people who is responsible if questions arise. It isn't decorative. It has legal consequences. Rachel shook her head. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. Daniel didn't argue. Instead, he displayed another document on the screen. This is the email account used to communicate with our operations staff. At first glance, it looked like mine. Until Ethan leaned closer. There's an extra letter. Daniel nodded. Correct. It resembles Miss Nichols's address, but is not actually hers. Ethan looked at Rachel. You created another email account? Rachel didn't answer immediately. I just needed vendors to take things seriously. The room fell silent. She continued. They kept asking complicated questions. So, Ethan asked, Chelsea understands this stuff. I know she does. So I used her credentials. You used her name, I corrected. I didn't think it mattered. Melissa's words echoed in my mind. People rewrite history. I reached into my purse and removed the certified copy of the legal notice Melissa had helped me prepare. I found out less than 3 weeks ago. I slid it across the table. This was my response. Ethan picked it up. His eyes moved slowly across each paragraph. You immediately told the venue you weren't involved. Yes. You never tried to hide anything. No. Daniel spoke next. Our internal investigation confirmed Ms. Nichols notified us as soon as she became aware of the situation. He clicked to another slide. A timeline appeared. Every email, every submission, every correction, every phone call. Each entry included dates and times. No opinions, only records. Daniel pointed to one line. These compliance recommendations were submitted under Ms. Nichols' identity. He pointed to another. 3 weeks later, Ms. Nichols contacted us denying any involvement. Then another. Within hours of that notification, she formally rejected responsibility in writing. Ethan quietly compared the dates himself. He didn't need anyone to explain what they meant. The timeline explained itself. He slowly looked at Rachel. Why didn't you just ask your sister to help? Rachel rubbed her forehead. Because she would have said no. I answered before anyone else could. No. I would have said yes. Rachel looked at me surprised. I've offered to help from the beginning. I just wouldn't have let anyone sign my name. Her eyes dropped to the table. For the first time all afternoon, she looked less defensive than exhausted. Daniel opened one final section of the file. Our investigation uncovered another concern. Rachel immediately stiffened. I already told you. I'm referring to vendor documentation. He placed several invoices in front of Ethan. The florist. The lighting contractor. The entertainment company. Ethan flipped through them. His forehead tightened. These numbers? Daniel nodded. Several vendor changes were made after the original budget discussions. Rachel looked away. You said we were still within budget. Ethan continued reading. There are additional contracts. I was going to explain. When... Rachel didn't answer. Daniel spoke carefully. We're not suggesting criminal conduct. We are stating that several contractual changes were never disclosed to all responsible parties. Ethan slowly leaned back. So, the compliance paperwork, he looked toward me, wasn't the only thing hidden. Daniel answered quietly. No. Rachel finally broke. Tears filled her eyes. I just wanted everything to be perfect. Susan immediately stepped in. She was under enormous pressure. No one's denying that, Daniel said respectfully. But pressure doesn't authorize another person's professional identity. Richard had remained silent since entering the room. Now he spoke for the first time. Rachel. His voice sounded older than I remembered. Why didn't you tell us? She looked at him helplessly. Because Mom kept saying this wedding had to be flawless. Susan turned sharply. Don't blame me. Rachel laughed bitterly through her tears. You spent months telling me people judge everything. The flowers, the venue, the guest list, the family. You kept saying we couldn't look ordinary. Susan opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Ethan closed the folder, very gently, very deliberately. He looked at Rachel with disappointment more than anger. I don't care if centerpieces cost less. I don't care if guests drive older cars. I don't even care if we made mistakes. He paused. But I do care when trust disappears. Rachel whispered his name. Ethan. He stood. I need some time. We have guests waiting. I know. My groomsmen are waiting. I know. My parents are waiting. I know. But if I walk into that ballroom pretending none of this matters, he shook his head. I'll be starting a marriage by ignoring the very thing it depends on. Trust. He looked toward Daniel. What happens now? Daniel answered honestly. The venue can accommodate a delay. How long? As long as necessary to ensure all outstanding documentation is accurate. Ethan nodded once. Then he looked at me. Chelsea, I'm sorry. I could hear that he meant it. Not because the wedding had been interrupted, because he finally understood that I had never tried to ruin it. I simply returned a small understanding smile. I never wanted today to become this. I know, he said quietly. I can finally see that. Outside the conference room, the string quartet stopped playing. Inside, no one rushed to fill the silence. For the first time in months, no one was arguing over appearances. The truth had finally become impossible to decorate. The wedding did not happen that afternoon, at least not the way everyone had planned. Daniel stepped into the ballroom himself and addressed the guests with remarkable professionalism. He apologized for an unexpected delay involving administrative matters and assured everyone that the venue would provide refreshments while the couple decided how they wished to proceed. He never mentioned my name. He never embarrassed Rachel. He protected everyone's privacy even after everything that had happened. I respected him even more for that. About 2 hours later, I quietly left through a side entrance. No one stopped me. No one chased after me. For the first time all day, I felt like I could breathe. As I drove back toward Charlotte, my phone remained silent. I wasn't surprised. No one in my family had ever been good at speaking immediately after the truth came out. They preferred time, distance, and eventually, revision. 3 weeks later, Amanda called. Chelsea, hi. I wanted to tell you something before you heard it from someone else. I'm listening. Rachel and Ethan got married. I smiled to myself. I'm glad. It was small. Immediate family. A few close friends. No ballroom. No reception. No photographers from magazines. No elaborate social media coverage. Just a quiet ceremony at a local church outside Charleston after every issue with the venue had been corrected. That honestly sounded more like a marriage than a performance. I'm happy for them, I said. Amanda hesitated. I wasn't expecting that answer. Why, I thought you'd be angry. I wasn't trying to stop them from getting married. I know. I was trying to keep my name off paperwork that wasn't mine. Amanda laughed softly. I think more people understand that now. After we hung up, I returned to work. Life slowly settled back into its normal rhythm. Until my mother's name appeared on my phone one Sunday afternoon, I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. Hello? Chelsea. Her tone was unusually calm. We need to move forward. I've moved forward. That's not what I mean, she sighed. The family is still talking. I'm sure they are. They think Rachel committed fraud. I haven't used that word, but they're saying it. I can't control that. Susan became quieter. You embarrassed your sister. I looked out my living room window before answering. No, I didn't. You involved the venue. They contacted me. You could have handled it privately. I tried. You should have called Rachel. I called the only people who could remove my name from documents. Silence. Then she tried another approach. You've always been the reasonable one. There it was. The familiar role. Be reasonable. Translate that into plain English, and it usually meant accept being treated unfairly so everyone else stays comfortable. I'm still reasonable. Then apologize. For what? For disrupting the wedding. I almost laughed. Instead, I asked one simple question. Mom, if someone signed your name to legal paperwork without asking, would you apologize for objecting? She didn't answer because there wasn't a good answer. Finally, she said, families shouldn't involve outsiders. The venue wasn't an outsider. It was the business directly affected. You know what I mean. I do. And I disagree. She ended the call without saying goodbye. 3 days later, my father knocked on my front door. Richard had never visited without calling first. That alone told me something had changed. When I opened the door, he looked older than he had only a month earlier. He held 2 cups of coffee from my favorite cafe. I wasn't sure if you'd let me in. I wasn't sure either. I stepped aside. We sat on the back patio overlooking the small garden I'd planted after my divorce. For nearly 10 minutes, we talked about tomatoes, weather, his golf game, anything except the reason he had come. Finally, he set his coffee down. I owe you an apology. I looked at him quietly. I should have spoken up years ago. Neither of us mentioned specific moments. We didn't need to. There were too many. When your mother criticized you, I stayed quiet. When Rachel repeated things that weren't fair, I stayed quiet. When everyone assumed you were struggling financially, I knew better. I frowned. You knew, Richard nodded. I saw enough. The house. Your savings habits. The way you never borrowed money. I knew you were doing fine. Then why didn't you say something? He smiled sadly. Because I convinced myself keeping peace was helping. It wasn't. I know. His voice cracked slightly. I understand that now. That conversation lasted nearly 3 hours. Not because we solved everything, because for the first time we stopped pretending nothing had happened. An apology couldn't erase decades, but accountability mattered. So did effort. Rachel reached out twice over the following month. The first message read, I'm sorry everything became so messy. I didn't respond. Not because I hated her, because the apology described circumstances, not choices. A week later, another message arrived. I've spent a lot of time thinking. I didn't just misuse your credentials. I convinced myself that because we were sisters, your reputation belonged to both of us. It didn't. I'm sorry for violating your trust." I read that message several times. It still didn't erase what happened. But it acknowledged what actually happened. There was a difference. I replied with only one sentence. "Thank you for taking responsibility." Nothing more, nothing less. We didn't suddenly become close sisters again. Healing isn't the same thing as restoring access. Over the following weeks, I quietly adjusted my life. I removed myself from the family group chat. I stopped attending gatherings where respect depended on staying silent. I answered calls when I wanted to, not because guilt demanded it. Amanda invited me to lunch one afternoon. Halfway through the meal, she smiled. "You seem lighter." "I am." "What changed?" I thought about the question. Then I realized the answer wasn't legal. It wasn't financial. It wasn't even about Rachel. "For years," I said, "I thought boundaries meant losing family." Amanda nodded. "And now?" "I've learned they reveal which relationships were healthy enough to survive honesty." She smiled. "I like that." A few days later, an envelope arrived in my mailbox. Certified mail. Return address, Harbor Point Grand Resort. "Attention, Daniel Mercer." I carried it inside without opening it. Something told me this wasn't another legal document. It felt more personal than that. I left the certified envelope on my kitchen counter until the next morning. Not because I was afraid to open it, because for the first time in months, I wasn't living from one crisis to the next. Whatever was inside could wait until after coffee. That alone felt like progress. The letter arrived on Harbor Point Grand Resort stationery. Inside was a handwritten note from Daniel Mercer, along with a copy of a formal letter addressed to the vice president of my company. I read Daniel's note first. "Chelsea, during my career, I've worked with thousands of clients and hundreds of outside professionals. Very few people respond to difficult situations with the level of integrity and restraint that you demonstrated. You protected your professional reputation without attempting to damage anyone else's. That deserves to be recognized. With your permission, I have shared my observations with your employer. I hope this letter reflects the professionalism you brought to a situation that should never have involved you. I wish you nothing but success. Daniel Mercer." I folded the note carefully before reading the attached recommendation. It wasn't exaggerated. It didn't portray me as a hero. Instead, it described something much more valuable: that I had promptly disclosed an unauthorized use of my professional credentials, that I had cooperated fully with the venue's internal review, that I had consistently communicated with honesty and respect, that I had helped prevent a potentially serious liability issue before it harmed guests, vendors, or the venue itself. Those were the kinds of qualities my company actually rewarded. 2 weeks later, my supervisor asked me to stop by her office. She closed the door and smiled. "I've been waiting for the right time to talk." "About what?" She held up Daniel's letter. "I've already heard the story from legal." I felt my stomach tighten. "I'm sorry they had to deal with that." She shook her head. "Chelsea, that's not why you're here." She slid another folder across her desk. "We're creating a new national position." I looked down at the title. Director of Compliance Strategy. "You've already been doing much of this work," she smiled. "Now we'd like to make it official." I looked back at her. "Are you offering me the position?" "We are." It came with a larger team, more responsibility, better compensation. But strangely, the salary increase wasn't what stayed with me. What stayed with me was the reason they gave me the job: trust, not appearances, not office politics, not popularity, trust. A month later, I bought a new home. Not a mansion, not a luxury estate. Just a quiet brick house with a wide front porch and enough room for the life I wanted to build. When the realtor handed me the keys, I thought about how different this purchase felt from the house I'd bought during my marriage. This one wasn't intended to impress anyone. It was meant to give me peace. Emily came over the following weekend carrying a potted magnolia tree as a housewarming gift. "Perfect choice," I said. "It survives storms." She smiled. "So do you." We planted it together in the backyard. Months passed. The holidays approached. Richard called one evening. "Would you have dinner with me? Just us." Just us. Dinner became a monthly tradition. Sometimes we talked about family, sometimes we didn't. What mattered was that he stopped pretending silence solved problems. He had begun choosing honesty over comfort. That mattered to me. Susan also reached out. More than once. Her messages sounded familiar. Let's put the past behind us. We're still family. People make mistakes. Eventually, she asked if we could return to the way things used to be. I answered politely, "I hope you have a happy holiday, Mom. I'm willing to have a respectful relationship. I'm not willing to return to unhealthy patterns." She didn't respond. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty after setting that boundary. Rachel wrote several times over the next few months. Unlike before, her messages slowly changed. She stopped defending herself. She stopped blaming stress. She stopped talking about appearances. Instead, she began asking questions. What would rebuilding trust actually look like? That was the first question that gave me hope. Not because I suddenly trusted her again, because she finally understood trust wasn't automatic. It was earned. We met for coffee almost a year after the wedding. There were no dramatic speeches, no tears, no miraculous reconciliation. Just two sisters having an honest conversation for the first time in years. Rachel looked at me and quietly said, "I spent so much energy trying to convince strangers that my life was perfect. I almost destroyed one of the few relationships that actually mattered." I believed she meant it. Forgiveness came easier than trust. Trust took longer, and that was okay. One afternoon, I drove back to Charleston for a work conference. During a break, I stopped by Harbor Point Grand Resort. Daniel happened to be walking through the lobby. He recognized me immediately. "Chelsea, it's good to see you." "You too." We talked for only a few minutes. Before I left, I thanked him. "For what?" "For making that phone call." He smiled. "I didn't change your life." "No. You already knew who you were." He nodded toward the entrance where wedding guests were arriving for another celebration. "I simply refused to ignore the paperwork." I laughed. That sounds exactly like something a venue manager would say. And exactly like something a compliance consultant would appreciate. He wasn't wrong. As I walked toward my car, I remembered standing at that same entrance nearly a year earlier while my own mother insisted I didn't belong. Back then, I thought the most important moment had been hearing Daniel call my name. Now I understood something different. The important moment wasn't that someone finally recognized me. It was that I had stopped waiting for my family's approval to recognize myself. Respect cannot be built on pretending. Love cannot survive without accountability. And boundaries are not walls meant to keep people out. They're doors that only remain open for those willing to walk through them with honesty. Some people hear stories like mine and immediately ask whether I regret standing my ground. The truth is, I regret staying silent for so many years, far more than I regret setting boundaries. When people you love repeatedly use guilt appearances or family loyalty to control your choices, it's easy to believe protecting your peace is selfish. It isn't. Healthy boundaries are not acts of revenge, they're acts of self-respect. Forgiveness can free your heart from bitterness, but forgiveness does not require restoring the same level of access to someone who has not rebuilt trust. Those are two very different things. If you've ever been treated as less valuable by your own family because of money status or appearances, I hope this story reminds you that your worth has never depended on someone else's opinion. Sometimes justice doesn't look like public humiliation or dramatic revenge. Sometimes justice is simply telling the truth, letting evidence speak for itself, and choosing a healthier future. I genuinely love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting your boundaries? Share your experience in the comments if you're comfortable, and if stories like this resonate with you, consider subscribing so we can continue these conversations together. This is a fictional story created for entertainment, education, and reflection.